The river and the plan. In the beginning, there was a river. It was not a line on a map, but a living thing. A vast, complex system. It was a creature of profound contradiction. It could cradle stones in its currents, polishing them like treasured secrets. Yet, it held a wild spirit, and in a moment of fury, it could tear down everything it had built. A creator and a destroyer in the same breath. The people who lived by its banks understood this. They were the first process improvers. Their knowledge was local and intimate. They built small earthen mounds, planted willows whose roots would hold the soil, and then listened to the river's whispers. When a small flood came, they learned, adapted, and rebuilt, a little wiser than before. Their method was humble, iterative, and deeply connected to the reality of their work. Then came the age of the great engineers, the masters of the blueprint. They saw the river not as a living system, but as a problem to be solved, a variable to be eliminated. They held the philosophy of absolute control. They drew straight lines on a wild map. They poured unyielding concrete and drove gleaming steel into the earth. They built massive levees, high and proud, forcing the river into a silent, sterile channel. This was their way, a rigid plan designed to impose a single, static order on a dynamic world. For a time it worked. Behind the walls, cities grew, built on the illusion of perfect safety. The project plan was successful. The water stayed within its concrete lane. This was the Great Levee effect. Yet, risk was not being reduced. It was simply being hidden, concentrating behind the wall an immense, invisible pressure. The river, being a complex system, had a lesson to teach about control. It gathered its strength from an unprecedented distant storm, a black swan event the engineers' formulas had dismissed as a statistical improbability. The river swelled. With a bellow that shook the earth, the levee, the perfect, unyielding plan, did not bend. It shattered. The fury unleashed was 100 times more catastrophic than any flood the valley had ever known, washing away the city built on false promise of certainty. From the wreckage, a new wisdom began to percolate. It didn't arrive with a new blueprint, but with a new philosophy, one the ancient villagers would have recognized. It was called Agile. It looked at the broken levees and the hubris of the great engineers and said, "Listen to the river." Agile's philosophy was one of humility and respect for complexity. It understood that the goal was not to build a system that never fails, but to build a system that is safe to fail. Instead of one massive plan, Agile proposed small experiments, or sprints. It would build a small section of a new, softer embankment, see how the river responded, and gather feedback. These small, seasonal floods were not disasters. They were information, vital data loops that made the system smarter and more resilient. Instead of building higher, stronger walls to fight the river, the Agile thinkers did the opposite. They moved the dikes inland. They gave the river back its floodplains. They dug new, shallow channels where the water could spread out and slow down, dissipating its energy harmlessly. They worked with the system, not against it. The old, rigid levees were the performance improvement projects of the past, impressive, brittle, and ultimately doomed to fail against the reality of a changing world. Making room for the river didn't try to eliminate uncertainty with a rigid plan. Instead, it built something with the slack, autonomy, and adaptive capacity to absorb unexpected shocks and turn them into opportunities. The story of the river is our story. It's a cautionary tale of how our attempts to impose rigid control on complex systems inevitably lead to a catastrophic failure. Agile, a philosophy that teaches us not to fear the unpredictable nature of our world, but to embrace it. It teaches us the goal is not to build a perfect wall against change, but to cultivate the resilience to work with the flood.